Welcome to RPG DOJO, where we talk about the theory of game development. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about save points. Back in the old school JRPGs, save points were everywhere, but now they're few and far between. Even Final Fantasy kept the save point system all the way up until Final Fantasy 15. And even in that game, you can't save in dungeons, but you can still save anywhere else. Save points have been a staple for RPG games for a very long time, so when you're making your RPG Maker game, an important question you have to ask is, will you have save points in your game, or will your players be allowed to save wherever they want? This question isn't about convenience, it's also about player psychology and what exactly it is you're trying to achieve. Is your game a quick game that people will pick up and put down 5 minutes later? Something they'll play while waiting for a train? Or a doctor's appointment? Or is this a game where you want your players to experience it by sitting down and playing it in solid chunks of time? Let's get into the pros and cons. Pros: save points create a sense of risk. Knowing that you might have to repeat an entire dungeon if you play through without any care in the world, your players will be more engaged in the action, trying to make sure they don't make mistakes along the way, making their healers heal and their tanks tank, making sure they don't just mindlessly button mash through every fight. Although if your players are button mashing through every fight, there's a different issue, but I digress. Creating a sense of risk means your players can't just save the game, kick the chicken in Skyrim, see what happens, and then reload to 10 seconds earlier. Save points can commit a player to playing your game for a certain chunk of time. For example, if you believe the best way for the player to experience this part of the game is to enjoy it over one solid chunk of time, save points forces a player into that narrative flow. You're able to force a player through a chain of events that you believe need to be experienced in one sitting, and then you can give them the option to save afterwards. It also makes the consequences for your player much more meaningful. Knowing that they have a choice to make and the last time they saved was half an hour ago, players are really going to think about the choice they make, knowing that it's going to be hard for them to go back and make that choice again. It also helps if your game has a point of no return, and once they walk through that door, they can't walk out. So placing a save point right at the start of that dungeon gives the players a safe option out. If they go into the dungeon and decide that they're underleveled or they don't have enough skills, they've got a safe point that they can reload the game outside of the dungeon before they got stuck. Finally, save points act as important indicators of boss fights. By placing a save point right outside a boss room, you let the player know that a boss is coming up, they should heal up, equip weapons, and save the game before progressing. If you're walking through a dungeon, you come across a save point, you don't walk past it, you save the game. It's a nice hint to the players so that they don't get surprised, walk into a boss room and die, and then have to go all the way back to the start of the dungeon and redo that again. Now we'll get into some cons of save points. One of the cons is locking players in for a solid chunk of time. Whilst this might be good if your game is a typical JRPG, if your game is designed to be played for 5 minutes at a time and then put down again afterwards, you don't want to use save points. It's just going to lock players in that didn't want to be locked in the first place. They just wanted a quick fix of your game. Now, save points can break the fourth wall for some players. Whilst I would argue those people are just being pedantic, seeing a save point can pull the players out of the fantasy that they are playing a video game. As opposed to being able to save whenever they want, they get to choose when they break the fourth wall, not arbitrarily forcing it upon them when they see a save point. Again, people that think like that, I would argue, are a bit pedantic. Now, this shouldn't matter if you're not a lazy developer, but save points are a lot of time and effort. You have to decide where each and every save point is located to match with the narrative flow of your game, in appropriate places in and outside of dungeons, to make sure you don't get your players stuck in a dungeon where they have no opportunity to buy items, heal up, level up, etc. Essentially forcing them to reload to a point before the dungeon if they have separate saves. As I said earlier, you can prevent this sort of stuff by having a save point right outside the dungeon, just so they can save in case their spelunking doesn't go according to plan, but I digress. Save points are more than just whacking them down anywhere. They need to balance out with your narrative flow and your game difficulty. Lastly, save points can be incredibly frustrating. If your player's gotten through a dungeon and they're right outside the boss room and they're like a few meters away from the save point and then they get into a random encounter and then die, they then have to redo that entire dungeon based on one bad battle, which can be incredibly off-putting. I myself have turned off a game, put it down and come back a few days later just because I've died right at the end of a dungeon and I didn't like the prospect of redoing it again. So we've gone over the pros and cons of save points. The next question is, should you have one in your game? I would say yes and no. As we've discussed, it's entirely contextual. If your game is just something someone picks up for 5 minutes and then puts it down, they should be able to save wherever. In fact, it should just auto-save when they leave the game. But if you're creating a traditional JRPG, then I would say yes. Save points are an important tool to control narrative flow, to stop them getting soft-locked in any dungeons, giving them a subtle hint that behind that door is a boss. Maybe you want to save. And it gives the players a safe spot to return to outside of dungeons if things don't pan out. Now for the final part of this video, I'm going to be showing you my top 3 favourite different types of save points. But before we do that, if you love RPG Maker tips, tricks, tutorials, and just general discussion about RPG Maker, then scroll down and hit subscribe and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload a new video. The Moogles from Final Fantasy IX. This is a cute little save idea, and it makes interacting with the Moogles an intricate part of saving the game outside of doing the little mail quests that they have going on. Crystals are always a safe bet. You see a crystal, you save at the crystal. Everyone knows why it's there, everyone knows what it's for. It's a save crystal. My number 1 favourite would have to be Save Hobos from Tales of a Drunken Paladin, which is an RPG Maker game that was made on RPG Maker VX. It is a funny repeating joke that has utility purposes, narrative purposes. It even expands into an entire arc in Part 3, Hobotropolis, centred entirely around the homeland and the culture of Save Hobos. Those, I'd say, are my top 3 save point systems that are designed within RPGs. I was going to make a video for like 100 subscribers and then we hit 150 and now we're well on the way to 200. So let's keep up the momentum. Also, welcome to my face. Smash the like button for the face reveal. And let me know in the comments if you enjoy this style of video so I can keep making them for you. And I'll see you in the next video.